Good evening, fellow South Africans. Goeienaand. From a nice and warm Brisbane. What I've got for you today is a video taken in the South African Parliament where the banks, and in particular Nedbank, set out the case that even if someone has their land taken away from them, they are still liable for the bank loan. Now, it's quite an interesting discussion. There are a number of questions asked. Perhaps the most telling comment is the one by one of the few white parliamentarians, and he basically says, hey, legally they might still have to pay, but believe me, they're not going to. But I'll let you watch the video. And I hope you're having a great day. Okay. I think it's important just to add this little bit of information as well. And that is that the banks should be having sleepless nights. And I'll explain to you why. Just on farmland, the loans are 150 billion rand. 150 billion rand. But there's a complication here. The changing of the constitution will allow the government to expropriate land without compensation that is residential property. So if you've got a flat, if you've got a house or whatever, they can just come along and take your land away and give it to an African family. And the loans that the banks have on residential property, and this is the elephant in the room, is $850 billion. 850 billion rand. Now, you combine the farm loans with the residential loans, that's R1 trillion of bad debt, because 99% of people are not going to pay for something that has been taken away from them. That's theft. Why should they be left with the liabilities? So the banks, they're going to collapse in South Africa. I mean, they cannot incur that amount of debt. The banking system is going to be stuffed, and the country will suffer as a result of that. Now, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That way you'll be able to be kept informed of what's going on. And more importantly, every Sunday night we have a live stream, and we have a very interesting one this Sunday at 8 p.m. So I hope to see you there. Okay, take care.
Just the other question around a loan and expropriation without compensation. The security that is put up for that loan doesn't absolve the owner of that debt. So a bank would have recourse to the owner, albeit that the security has been taken away. Now, from a bank's perspective, the last thing we want to do is actually fold an entity or an individual. It's a last resort. So a bank has got two options. Either they can demand their money back, or they could try to strike a deal with that customer on a repayment term basis over an extended period of time. And my sense is that that's where the banks will go, because we certainly wouldn't want to unnecessarily put a family into insolvency. I'm not sure I've answered all the questions. If there's anything we've missed that...
And I think, Mutapa, if you're satisfied with the inequality question, I'm not sure if they've answered that.
Sorry, the inequality question.
Yes, or how do you then, with what you are your proposition, how does it deal with inequality on that question?
Yeah, I tried to sort of refer to that. I think when we want to deal with issues of inequality and inequity, and there are plenty in our country, I think we need to deal with them in a way that enables people, once we put something on the table that gives people resources, gives people land, whatever the case may be, that enables them to then interact with an economy that on an ongoing basis they can use whatever we've dealt with from a point of view of inequality to continue to grow, develop assets, and to grow as a human being. I think that to just say that we expropriate land, give it to people who have been deprived of land without taking into account whether there's security of tenure, whether that person can raise a loan, whether that person can develop the land. As Pierre said, a piece of land without all of that is not worth too much. There might be emotional and other issues related to that, historical issues. But we need to talk about, in our country, we need to utilize optimally all the assets we have as a country to actually grow this economy and to grow individuals. And so I think that we need to deal with inequality in a more sustainable way. And we are certainly of the view that if we put our heads together as South Africans and deal with critical and emotional and political and real issues like this one in a way that actually builds this country and brings us together, I think we can do it. So that would be our view. Just one other thing, Chair, I think an SME thing was mentioned. I agree that if we have security of tenure and if that people can actually access loans, they can access loans for productive capacity like growing small businesses and so on. I think that's what we need to do. I think let me also just say that as business through the CEO Forum, we've established a R1.5 billion SME fund to also promote small, medium enterprises. And we believe that we can't separate all of these issues, and that's why we're saying that deal with inequality more holistically. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Honorable Mulder, Honorable Korenov.
Can I have a follow-up before they answer?
Okay.
Thank you. Sir, I'm slightly disappointed because I requested specifically to say how to come into the picture. The other Agri-SA or some other people came with something and said the white farmers have got 35% of the land, the government, and the other Africans, they hold about 35%. And to try and change this, they offered something. You guys said, no. We're holding money, there's very little you can do. And I'm just saying that, can you consider that? Thank you very much.
Honorable Mulder,
Yes.
Honorable Korenov, Honorable Godi, Honorable Paulson. In that order.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to thank the Banking Association for a very clear and concise presentation. I think it's quite clear. And you are legally sound in your argument when you says that if a previous home owner still owes a bond after his property has been expropriated without compensation, he's technically liable. But it just shows the absurdity of the whole issue as far as I'm concerned. You won't get money from such a home owner, I can assure you. But if I can come to your presentation, specifically on page 4, where you deal with threats, the 5th bullet from the top, you refer to the banks having to recover their loans that they've already extended, and you refer to agricultural operations, and you give a figure of 148 billion. Now, we all know that in terms of Section 25, it does not deal with only agricultural property, it deals with all property. And for argument's sake, let's then just take land in total. This figure of 148 billion, I guess, deals with agricultural debt. May I ask, what is the exposure of the banks with regard to other debt in terms of home loans? Because those will also come into jeopardy if this section is changed. What is the amount?
Honorable Korenov.
Chair, for the sake of time, I shall ask my question to Nedbank.
All right, Honorable Godi.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. Firstly, to appreciate the fact that on page 2, at least you start by acknowledging the colonial past and the indignity suffered by the indigenous majority when they were dispossessed of land, because one of, at least for me, new setting thing, sitting here and listening to presentation has been the almost a historical approach to this issue. It's almost as if there is no history. We're just dealing with something that arose last week. And I think it's always important to put that in perspective. And I've always felt that those who had not suffered dispossession, whenever they've come to make presentation, there is no sense of an emotional solidarity with those who had suffered those historical dispossession. So it becomes basically an intellectual argument or debate that is devoid of living human beings who are affected. But my point is on page 4, right at the top, the first bullet point that says an amendment of Section 25 has the potential to undermine all property rights. Don't you think that was a bit loose? Because that might amount to scaremongering, basically. That might amount to, I think I would want to leave it at that. And also the 148 billion in loans. I don't know if you're able to, Chair, I know it may not be, to the last dot in terms of age analysis, because, beer hall talks have been that a lot of those who own property have rushed to you to get bonds as a way of frustrating or ensuring that land cannot be expropriated because there will be loans to the banks and all that, just to check if indeed it is true or it is just part of the things we hear. And on the issue of communal land, well, I think you, Mr. Kuvadia, your colleague, did at least lay some of my concerns, that when we talk of security of tenure, there are a number of options and not the usual give them a title deed, because when we're fighting for freedom, we're saying that communal areas have actually been dumping grounds. Our people have been thrown into the dry, not so fertile lands. And now all of a sudden we're told, give these people a title deed, they will become rich or they can make money out of the very lands that we're always saying that, cannot be economically used meaningfully. And also, I think 94 meant nothing in terms of how people just ride roughshod on anything that is African. Communal land system, it's an African tradition, African system. There are people who believe in it, people who live it. How you deal with it has to give recognition to the fact that it's a system of a people. And if it's going to be changed, it cannot just be some pronouncement by individuals who are not even affected, who have never lived in communal areas. So I just think that the issue around intergenerational wealth being unlocked because communal land has security of tenure, I see it as being part of that pattern in terms of how we look at it. I grew up in the rural areas. My late father's homestead belongs to me in the context of the current arrangement. So this insecurity and what it implies, I think it's probably more an ideological question than a real and practical generalized problem. Thank you, Chair.
Paul, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Mr. Gavadia. I got your presentation, and I see that you are opposing the amendment to the Constitution, and one of the things you say is that we shouldn't tamper with the Constitution, and yet we've changed the Constitution several times post it being brought into law. So, and always to the benefit of South Africans. So I think it is rather disingenuous to say that we shouldn't amend it this time around as well. I think more importantly here is to look at how the bank has transformed, or banking sector has transformed and since very little has changed in the banking sector, in the way you underwrite risk. You want to have a title deed so that you can evict tenants, which you've done liberally for years now. So isn't it time that the bank has actually changed the way in which they operate and which they view as security and how they underwrite risk, as opposed to wanting a title deed so that people can secure whatever assistance they need from banks? I think that would be where we should start looking, is that how banks operate and how they view clients, because we know that very few of your clients are black, far less than it's been in the past. So we'd like to know, what is the bank doing about its transformation, other than how you employ people? How do you support potential customers, especially blacks? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Honourable Pauls, you must come back to the subject matter. That's just a general question to BASA. We can facilitate an engagement with them at tea, and they will sponsor the tea, I guess. All right, Honourable Tele.
Minutes and 20 minutes and cut it, like we did at the public hearings. Otherwise, we're going to be in serious